Hello, I'm very happy to welcome our speakers today to talk about why and how to communicate about its social and environmental impacts. It's a hot topic, and it will be in English this time. So si vous êtes français, vous pouvez.
So if you're a French speaker, you can ask for an interpreting headset in order to hear the conversation in French.
To start, I would like you to introduce yourself. Maybe, Lorraine, you can start.
Sorry, it's been a bit since I had one of these on. So, pleasure to be here and speaking on this table and on the topic for all of you guys. My name is Lauren Zeringer, and I have been working in the space of fashion for close to a decade, and most close to the topic, I was the Global Business Development Director for the Sustainable Apparel Coalition. So we built a coalition that has enabled the global fashion industry to, in many ways, become sustainable and transparent. And since then, worked in various capacities of entrepreneurship and innovation with hubs in the Netherlands and brands and couture talent pushing the envelope of sustainability. So happy to be here. I live in Amsterdam, and I will pass it over then to...
Thank you.
It's good. So my name is Alexia, and I do various things. I used to have my own brand, so fashion brand. Then I am the co-founder of an NGO, Itinérance. It's about crafts and transmission of crafts and luxury. And I'm also a consultant for various fashion houses, luxury houses, and international organizations. And in my spare time, I also teach in some schools about sustainable fashion and luxury.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is this working? Hi, thank you very much for having us. It's one of my favorite topics to talk about. My name's Laura. For the last 20 years, I've worked with a combination of big global brands, particularly in Europe and the US, also with manufacturers and suppliers in India, and with a range of startups and advocacy organizations within the area of sustainability and social impact. And what I do for those organizations, as I think it says there, is something that I talk about story-driven strategy for sustainability and impact. And the reason I have moved into that space after 20 years is partly because stories, when we're in the sustainability space, stories are incredibly compelling to humans. We are naturally curious, we want to know. And sustainability, I think, is dependent on being able to kind of bring people together on that journey across organizations, but also the public. So I work with organizations on their strategies, really building powerful stories from the beginning. And the reason for that, which is why we're here, is it really helps to have those stories right at the heart of the organization, really true, really authentic. And that's how I think organizations avoid greenwashing. So a lot of the work that I'm doing now is around the new regulations for anti-greenwashing in the EU and how organizations can avoid getting into trouble and make sure their communications are authentic and true when they talk about sustainability. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. Céline?
Hi everyone, my name is Céline Dassonville. I'm having multiple roles. I'm co-founder of Fédération de la Mode Circulaire, so circular fashions coalitions within France. I founded Etiwork, which is a niche consultancy company working both on transformation of businesses, including implementation of circularity, traceability, and making sure that before we communicate, we do the job properly. And leveraging on what you mentioned, before doing the storytelling, you need to gather the facts that will enable you to have a true communication strategy that cannot be challenged in regard of greenwashing claims. So that's something that Etiwork does. And I'm also a director at Upscotch Group, which is a PR consultant, a PR agency, doing both events and communication strategy, and I'm making sure that brands, when they communicate, they have in mind the opportunity and the risk that sustainability can represent, and that they're using it properly in regards of the new CSRD that will be one big regulations for European players.
Well, thank you. My first question is, at a time when greenwashing and green soft power practices are being denounced, some players in the fashion industry are remaining silent about their CSR policy and impact on the environment. Do you think this is a good strategy? Laura, baby.
I can take it if anyone else wants to.
Sure.
No. Well, if you are greenwashing, then yes, probably stop talking about it. That probably is a good strategy. In general, no. We're talking obviously about green hushing, as it's called, where brands are, companies are too nervous to talk about their sustainability strategy. I think we all know the value of communicating sustainability, both from a stakeholder perspective and from a consumer perspective, and also from a talent perspective, which is actually really important for Gen Z talent. I think what's interesting to me about this challenge is that where I see a lot of issues and a lot of green hushing occurring is when your sustainability or ESG team and your marketing and comms team are not aligned. And actually sometimes they're quite misaligned. They have quite different objectives. So I think, no, it's not a good strategy, but I think it is a great opportunity within the regulations now to really go back to the very heart, kind of like you said, what's the very heart of what your sustainability and ESG strategy is? And for marketing and communications people to really invest the time understanding that, working with sustainability teams. And for me, what I try to push people to do is kind of bring together, what can you say? What's the remit of things you can say that are true and real and honest? But then more than that, what should you say? And for me, that's when communications become, you can be really confident because they're true, they're honest, they're simple, they're relevant, and they're differentiated. So I think now is a great time to reset on that and really work towards finding, if you're not confident in what you're saying, going back to the beginning, figuring out what you can say, and then making it really relevant and compelling and differentiated for your various audiences. And I think actually it's an opportunity rather than a time to go silent.
Yes, Céline.
So maybe to leverage on that, because I fully agree about what you say. There is a challenge currently that it's not easy to tackle. It's good to have regulations because greenwashing is not, or social washing is not something that should be untitled. But as well, if there are too many norms, it's getting sometimes counterproductive in terms of paving the way for getting better. And I think it was very interesting. It was Emma Watson, who was on the board of Kering as a chief sustainability advisor, that was saying perfection is the enemy of progress in regard of sustainability. Because with sustainability, it's not always black and white. You cannot say that, I don't know, natural fibers will be always better than chemical fibers or new biomaterials. It's very complex, and what one brand can find as being very sustainable might not be sustainability for the other, because it's all depend on which impact you're going to take into considerations. So sustainability should leave some space, as well as regulations, to be creative. But they need to avoid fake claims where only anecdotic actions that might be only, I don't know, let's say 0.01% of the sales of a brand cannot be turned into a big thing if it doesn't scale all over the place. So to respond to that question, silence is not the good things. And if you look at what is going to happen in 2 years' time, where everyone is going to be in the obligation of publishing the CSRD reports, then everyone is going to access the information and everyone is going to be able to compare the performance of the different companies. So in any cases, not saying anything, it's not going to be good. But you need to find the right way of telling things with cautious, not pretending that you are the best, because sustainability is not always about being the best, but showing honesty on proof points in what you want to claim about your product and your company.
Yeah, and it's also kind of protection in the end, because if you communicate on what you do and you are transparent, the bad buzz are avoided in a way. What do you think, Alexia?
There is a difference between being quiet and being silent. So I really work with, well, I used to work with different brands that are very quiet, but they invest a lot, they do a lot, and they don't want to communicate too much yet. They are in the process of, and they want to feel ready because they want to have this culture into the company. Greenwashing is not about someone in the company woke up and said, "Ole, this morning I'm going to do the big greenwashing." It's about the lack of knowledge, and the brands, some brands know they are not ready. No, they are not ready because their communication managers, their marketing officer, whatever, they are maybe lacking information. So if they want to keep it quiet, there is a reason, because it's so easy to use a wrong word. So to my mind, I think it's quite logical to be quiet if you don't feel ready to talk a lot about it. You can have this information ready, like I will say Chanel. This is my example, but Chanel has such great teams working on sustainability. We are talking about someone with an entity with a lot of means, but they don't talk that much, and yet there is evidences.
Thank you. Lorraine, you want to add something?
Yeah, I guess one thing I wanted to add is that, so the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, which has over 250 members and more or less represents the majority of the fashion industry, it started out of a need for collaboration and transparency around how to measure, what to measure, and why in the fashion supply chain, we don't have a standard of measurement. And so I think one of my roles in building that coalition was also having the opportunity to speak with thousands of brands, from startups to CSR managers at Moncler, at LVMH. And there is definitely a range of financial resource to have the right tools, and then once you do have the right tools for measurement, getting that data, putting it through processes. And I left the SAC in 2022, and only 2 years or 2 reporting cycles annual have passed since then, and I'm pretty sure that the whole industry was not yet finished. So I think that one of the big important things is you don't want to communicate something you don't know. And I do think that the fashion industry is about to have an exponential growth in high quality data and awareness of things. But sometimes I think being silent is never good, but you can then say what your ambitions are. And I think that can be a very cool message to share.
Thank you. Yes.
Maybe to build on that, I think one point that you mentioned, Alexia, that is very, very important is training. So far, CSR strategy have remained within the CSR departments, and maybe they've been cascading at the heart of the business with the managing directors. But the people who communicate, and I'm talking about communication directors, I'm talking about agency that sometimes take the brief of a client and spin it to make it more trendy or fashionable. they're not really being trained on what they can do and they can't do, because it can be risky for the reputation of the brands. So I would say that training has to come to agency, and training has to come to communication directors to make it efficient. And that is very, very important. And you don't communicate if you don't have any proof points. That's something as well that is really important. And as you said, what is great is that we're coming to a point where we're having agreements on at least on how to measure environmental impacts. This is not the case of social impacts, because this is not yet really standardized, but we're getting some good elements to be able to talk without taking too many risks.
So you would say that it's better to be transparent, but regarding the communication, it's another thing you have to take care.
To clarify it, I think that there are different levels of communications. There are advertising, and there is communication to the stakeholders. So first things, you need to make sure that you communicate properly internally within your company, that you have as well onboarded all your suppliers, and that there is no little dirty secret within your supply chain. And then maybe you want to advertise at the product level or at the corporate level, but advertising is going to be what you do, what you have done, all the rest.
I think that's such an interesting point to build on when you're talking about communications, is the communication skill of segregating your audiences and understanding what's the right thing to say to your internal stakeholders, your supply chain, your investors and the public, and they're not the same thing, not from a kind of informational perspective, a detailed perspective, or a relevance perspective. And I 100% agree on your point on training comms teams. I think there's also a little bit in the sustainability space as well, where we can bridge that gap, and sustainability teams can be a little more savvy about where to communicate what and what's the right level and gravity to communicate to different audiences. And I think that will really help sustainability communications become more compelling and interesting.
Thank you. My second question is, what benefits can fashion companies hope to gain from better communication about their social and environmental impact in terms of image and maybe results? Alexia, maybe you know something about it with Atelier Bartavel. You had an experience.
Yeah, Atelier Bartavel used to be my brand. We stopped the brand during the COVID crisis for various reasons, because actually we were not aligned anymore with having a brand. So I know that for a small brand with the purpose-driven brand, let's say, you can communicate anything because it's a small structure and you do it with your own purpose. So it means even if you don't have a certification, it's true, because it's a human, it's a project where you have people around and you meet them and you know what is the value chain. If you talk about a big brand, it's not the same at all, because you don't know all the value chain. So that's the difference. My point here is to communicate needs to have a purpose. It's like human. If you try to have just a campaign for having a campaign, it's not good for your brand, because it won't be differentiation for your brand. So I always show that if you really want to talk about CSR, it needs to be different from another CSR campaign. So it means you need to create your own code. That's maybe something we will talk later about, brands that really create their own words, their own artistic direction. And so if you just have an activation about doing a resale platform and nothing around, you miss the good part of why your community should follow you, you know? So that's sorry, I was very long to explain that, but for a small brand, you have your purpose, it's very clear, your community follow you. For a big brand, you need first to come back to your own DNA, your platform, and then to link it to your CSR. And Guerlain will never communicate about CSR like Jacques Mus. And this is I think, the major point of CSR today. People find it boring. My students find sustainability boring. And they don't trust any brand most of the time. It depends which schools, which students, of course. But they are like fed up with sustainability. So how can we make it nice, cool, sexy, and like your brand? Voilà.
Thank you. Lorraine?
No, I think that's a really good point. I worked for some smaller French fashion brands, one of which was called Holistic, the label. And in thinking about sustainability being connected to your brand's DNA, this is definitely an example that was really at the forefront there. And one of the things, and also if you look at a brand like PenGaia, so PenGaia is, I think, on a bigger scale, one that's very easy to exemplify because they have a very simple product, and everything that they do CSR-wise really was started at the point of materials, them being in this material innovation space, regenerative materials, next-gen materials. And so I think, you know, PenGaia communicates about sustainability definitely very differently from Chanel, with a focus on how they are growing ecosystems with the sourcing of their materials. And I think also looking at a brand like Holistic, the label, which was started by a designer who left from Isabel Marant, that really was all about a capsule collection and a timeless circular experience. This was also a focus on materials, where you might then look at a company like Levi's, who will be focusing more on the recycled cotton, or maybe even their work with other organizations like a textile exchange or the Organic Cotton Accelerator, going all the way down to the smallhold farmer stories. So I think, yes, that I can't remember exactly the question, but that we were on a tangent about it being really important to speak about it in your own DNA. And I think the other part of the question was the benefits, and I think the benefits are that, A, you have a chance to tell your story, make your story about your brand, and all the other benefits around results that can come as well from then attracting the right talent, because the smartest people in the room who are creative, who are strategic, who are lateral thinkers, who are deep thinkers, which is very rare in the upcoming, I have a little sister, so I can say this only based on her, just graduating college, who are all using artificial intelligence. So I hate to be the one to say the elephant in the room, but you know, if you want to attract people in your brands who will be able to think laterally, have deep thought, these people want to go to brands that have a future. And I think that sustainability is part of that, and that drives results.
Yeah, what you say make me think about a subcontractor who were looking for new talents, and it was very difficult for him to attract new talents, even if he was working for very prestigious luxury houses, because he couldn't communicate at all about his clients. And it's a big issue, because it's true that even if apparently young people are fed up with sustainable communication, they like to communicate about what they are doing, and they want to know the purpose of the company, and they are proud to expose on social network and all what they are involved in. Céline.
So maybe to come back to the questions that I'm not sure that I'm remembering really well, but I would say that there are different tensions. There are you can tackle the subject by looking at the expectation of the consumer. And if you look at the expectation of the consumer in general, no matter what is the age of the populations, they tend to have more and more importance to the environmental and social considerations. However, if you take, for example, a luxury brand, it has always been expected by the brands to have sustainability embedded within the product that they were offering because of better quality or maybe better traceability of their supply chain. To a certain extent, brands need to look at that because new generations and existing generation will be more attached to that. However, we're talking about fashion. So it's come back to the questions on how we can make sustainability being a creative territory for designer, and how we can make sure that sustainability is not turning us into being dressed in the same way with, I would say, a fashion that is no longer a fashion, but a uniform that is sustainable by design. And I think for that, we are only paving the way of a new generations that is trained as a designer to take sustainability into considerations. And sustainability means circularity and it's mean designing with no waste. It's mean taking into considerations about what we call the out point. Well, there's a lot of things that need to be taken into considerations, and we will start to have it, I would say, creative. And one thing that is interesting to note is that it took 2 years to LVMH to launch their circular collections, but nowadays we're coming to a maturity where we can be sustainable and promise the same quality and the same creativity in the design of the clothes. So I think that it will come as being creative, and it should not come as being only a constraint. Yep. But no matter what, because it's becoming regulatory, if companies don't do it, they will be suffering backlash from consumer, from all the stakeholder within fashion. And if you look what has happened, most companies that had reputational backlash, they turn out to be the faster to really tackle the issue and change the way they work and be good at that, because it's very important to tackle this issue.
Yeah.
Yes, Laura?
Agree with everyone. I want to just add another perspective as well. We've talked a lot about brands, but from the kind of supplier perspective as well, because I think your question was about the benefit of communicating sustainability. And of course, before anything else, the main benefit comes from doing the work. So do the work first, of course. But I've been working with one of India's biggest apparel manufacturers for about the last 10 years. It's been a long journey for them on figuring out how do they communicate their sustainability. And a lot of that has been how to communicate it internally. There's 120,000 employees, and first it needs to be felt internally. But now what they're seeing, because that confidence is there, they're able to, they've just done their second sustainability report. It's taken a long time. But what they've really found as a business benefit is that they are able to have conversations with brands at a much higher elevation. So they're now part of the Fashion Pact, they're in the innovation, whatever it is, for Fashion for Good, they're on the board of Better Buying. There's a lot of conversations that have come from them that they're now talking to CEOs rather than talking to buyers. And I think down the supply chain, being able to get your sustainability and your CSR in order, being able to translate that into confident communications where you know what you're saying and everyone knows what they're saying, being able to do your report really elevates your business, particularly in a time where brands are facing so much reputational risk. And they're really worried about what's down the supply chain. So I think that's really, actually really interesting business benefit for suppliers too.
Thank you for this remark. Alexia?
Maybe one thing about that, it's when we talk about the impact of fashion, almost the main risk and the opportunity to do better are within the supply chain. And the scope 3 is the biggest in terms of impact. So I fully agree that there is now, for a subcontractor, a relation that is changing toward more co-constructions and towards more transparency about who really does make the clothes and how.
Yes, absolutely. You talked about Pangaia. Which fashion companies do you find most inspiring in terms of both their communication strategy and their concrete CSR actions? Yes.
I always state Marine Serre, of course, because she is, for the communication part, she really creates a new way of. If you listen to the words, it's it's difficult for me today. Regenerative garments. So she doesn't use anymore upcycling. She's like creating the words she wants to use for creativity, ecofuturism. So it's, if you just go in a own CSR strategy, it's creativity. So this is the first example that is for me very interesting. And of course, it's a new brand, so it's inside the business model. And so it's easy in a way. It's easier to have a new brand like her. I was talking about Chanel. It's a different way of moving because you have something that is already in history. So you cannot change Gabrielle Chanel, and you cannot change what she did. So I think this is quiet, but they do. What they did in Dakar was amazing. It was a blast. It was something co-created with the local communities of artists, artisans. So this is, for me, the beginning of a new way of collaborating as well. I could go further, but I leave yours.
I've also forgotten Andrea Cruz. She was a pioneer.
Yes,
and
this is also, you have pioneers like Maroussia Rebec. She did this amazing job to be here at the very beginning when no one really knew what was upcycling. This is the problem when you start something. It's very difficult to to have this education. And so now Maroussia is still in the game. She's still creating new projects. So she had the project with VP for having this creative lab. And she's still doing exhibitions and projects. So this is total creativity. And you see here that it's people that are very at the edge. So, of course, we are not, everyone is not a pioneer. Huh? But I would really say the most interesting in all these examples is how people can really promote their own values. So, I don't know, I was listening to Jacques Mus the other night talking about the producers, you know, this big issue now in France. And I don't know if Jacques Mus could be someone doing a CSR activation about this, because it would be great.
Yes, Céline?
So I would say that the most important is the alignments, as you said, of the DNA brands and the way the communication is activated. If we take, for example, luxury groups or things like that, Kering has always been at the forefront of sustainability. And the way they do it might be considered by others as opportunistic, but as well they've got a role as evangelists of the market, and they give to everyone their strategy. You look at the Kering standards, you look at the circularity strategy, everything is available, and it's really interesting to have access to this knowledge, whether you are small or big, because it's a gift. You look at Hermès, which is one of the most outstanding company in terms of doing CSR. They are very quiet, and they will be always very quiet, and they were never considered CSR as being an element in themselves, because it's within their own DNA. So they will be quiet, they will co-create, and they will use advocacy to talk about sustainability, and it's really great. And in fact, what I think is that everyone has to find the right tonality to talk about sustainability according to morals, values, or historical heritage of the brands, and it's important to do it in the way that is aligned with what is done within the business of collecting the informations and cleaning, doing your job before walk the talk, before you talk the walk.
Well, yes?
Yeah, I just agree completely with that. I think we talk about, my partner here as well, we work together, Patrick, we talk a lot about inside-out thinking, and I think that's exactly it. However, the best brands that you see talking about these issues are starting from the inside of the brand, the core of what the brand's about. Not fashion exactly, but I think that's why a lot of the gold standard in this for me is in the outdoor industry, the Patagonias of the world, because it's so core to who they are as a business. And I think they're the kind of brands, and that's the sort of thought process that I would be looking at if I was a brand or a business, is going, what's at the heart? What is the history of who we are? What is the truth of who we are? Or what is the truth of what we believe? And build out from there. And then what you say is going to have a lot more authenticity.
And maybe to leverage on that, it's not because you've got something as an asset that you leverage in your communications, like Patagonia was the first to push for better practices in regard of the environment, that you should forget what is expected. So, for example, Patagonia has quite recently a backlash in the way that they were managing their supply chain in terms of social rights. So no matter what, there are things that would be your key asset that you can communicate, but you still need to make sure that you're getting the basic right in terms of expectations and obligations, CSRs and social aspect of it.
You want to add something?
No, I think thinking about like the gold standards and who that we've found also very influential, and I just was going to say I agree. I think the smaller players have a lot more flexibility than newer brands. I worked with Duran Lantic. He's a couture designer and was really quite a troublemaker in the space of circularity and zero waste, and approaching the big multi-brand retailers and taking their stock and cutting it up and creating new creations, and really playing with the spaces of competition and secrecy, and putting LVMH and Kering into one garment, and just saying, are you really doing what you're doing? So I think there's a lot more flexibility and creativity, but that these smaller players make us smile and also remind us that fashion really is creative. And I think that the strategies that are the most interesting to me are ones that, as a consumer, actually speak to things I care about, and that, knowing what your DNA is. If you're a Patagonia, you're obsessed with the outdoors, and you want to find a way to fund grassroots organizations. So you start 1% for the planet, and environment's really important. But don't forget that people make your clothes, and to check those things. And I think that the more real your story and the more sincere, the more effective. And looking at the social element, I think this is the exciting part coming forward. And organizations like Organic Cotton Accelerator, and touching the stories of how important it is to support the well-being of social elements, I think is, for me, going to be a really key part of what I find as an attractive CSR policy, because I think that our actions are really going to affect our social well-being as well. And I think it's important that that starts to have a part in the story.
And can I be not nice? Because we talk about that, but there is one thing that consumers and any stakeholders need to understand, brands, suppliers, it's that sustainability has a cost. Yep. And these costs need to be paid. And we cannot have a sustainable supply chain that take care of paying right the peoples and making sure that there is traceability about the materials without paying more for the clothes. Second things, the more you want to do less but better, the less you need to order big volumes. So one thing that we need to tackle is how fashion can stop producing in bulk rather than designing by need on demands, because otherwise the fashion sectors will not solve this issue, the issue that we've got. So far, we talk about sustainability. We've got the impression that sustainability has become the new norm within fashion, but it is anything but that. The part of circular economy is decreasing all the time. The length by which we wear the clothes keep decreasing. The volume of the productions keep increasing. And as far as we keep producing more and more, sustainability within fashion will still be a bit of greenwashing, because if we don't incentivize the creative directors and the brands by producing less, repairing and reinventing out of their own stock rather than building new collections, then sustainability will be always a bit about greenwashing within the sectors. So there are a couple of issues that we are not addressing, and they are quite important if we want to make it right.
Thank you. So true. Yeah, you want to add something? No?
There was a quote from Stella McCartney. She said, I think it was 3 years ago, she said, I don't know what sustainability means today, because she is a pioneer, of course, but sustainability is a big word, and you have so many ways to reach sustainability. So what you say about, of course, there is the very low level of sustainability we expect to have better fabrics. What can we say about sustainable fabric? It's a good question. Huh? And then to reach this goal of less production, and people get to buy less as well. So this is the major goal of the fashion industry. And here, communication to reach it is a big problem. How can we sell garments as a brand? This was my problem as a brand. How we cannot cheat on that. It's to be honest, if you sell garments, you still are in the process of producing in the fashion industry.
There are new business models emerging, but even so, for example, as head of, as co-founder of Circular Fashion Federation in France, it's not because it's secondhand that is sustainable, because so far what we can see is that people that buy secondhand product, they don't buy it instead of virgin product, they buy it on the top. So there are still a tendency to consume more. There are new emerging business models, but they're not still proof point in terms of scalability. It's the renting of the clothes. I'm thinking about Studio Payette. It's interesting, but we are only paving the way for a bigger revolution, and I think that we are tiptoeing, but things will evolve a lot when new creative directors will come being trained to eco-designing, because it can change the KPIs and it can change a lot of things in regards of fashion.
Yes, so my fourth question is, fashion depends on people's consistent desire to reinvent themselves and to belong. This is something the second hand as well understood, the vintage and so on. How can we shift this desire towards new, more sustainable models? And how can smaller brands exist in the face of hyper-fast fashion and on social networks? This morning someone was mentioning yesterday the on-demand effort of Shein. They have a strong, the digital communication is really linked to the business success of this brand. What would you say about it?
Well, I'm not going to be able to speak about Shein, even though I do know their team quite well. It's been a while since I tapped into what they're doing. However, thinking back to your question and its, original form of what can we do to drive sustainability in fashion when it's so strongly tied to people's identity and growth and wanting to belong. On this matter, I have an opinion. And I think that, number one, my love of fashion, I'm going to use a bit of an anecdote at first, came from my grandmother. And she loved it all. She was very much so a Chanel girl. But she could only get Chanel if she came to Paris, because she is now passed away. This was quite a long time ago. She was much older. She would source Pareos on the beach in Sicily, or have pieces that she bought in India. And she loved everything that she had, whether it was a beautiful, special Chanel suit, or it was a Pareo of, any type, no label, but everything she bought, she loved. And I feel that this is something we've lost, that we have become this, not we in this grand sense, but that we all also need to ask ourselves, why are we buying things? Why am I buying this? I've worn this dress, I think, maybe to 30 conferences, and I still love it. Okay, so how can we become more high involvement consumers? And that's hard when you are transitioning maybe from your teen years. Maybe kids should be in uniforms. This was a masterful experience for me. Didn't ever have to think about it. Very, very little clothing bought during times of great identity change. I think that can be really helpful. But as we become adults, why are we putting our identity and sense of belonging outside of ourselves? And I think that is a bigger question. And I think that this can also be something that brands can lean into through repair, through quality, through engaging with their customer. And then fashion becomes something of beauty. It becomes an aesthetic, cultural pillar of our society, not a consumption of our short-term needs. So some fashion will always be that, obviously. Maybe a sports clothes or something you're wearing all the time has to be very tactile. But I don't think that, I think we can also change our cultural story about what fashion is from the consumer perspective. Yes. And I think that's a really important one, actually.
I think that's huge. I think it's such a...
I didn't know I had so much passion on that topic. I'm going to...
Such a great point. I think when we look at that culture of like hauls and just going out and buying stuff and stuff, what is the future of that? And what's the future of fast fashion? I don't know if there is one in the long term. I completely agree. And I love your point on uniforms. I still wear one. I'm wearing it now.
Just buying what you love.
Yes, exactly. And I think, when we talk about... you were mentioning like how can smaller brands kind of compete, and I was putting some thought into this, and I think there's a big, you talked about materials, I think there's a big question on materials, on circular models, on how to reuse waste. There's a really big opportunity on consumer behavior, and that's what really excites me in startups. I was reading something the other day about a brand called Painter. I'm not sure where they're based, actually. Maybe Amsterdam, I'm not sure. And they design jackets. They design 4 a year. And they create, it's all pre-order, and they create the exact number that have been ordered. And of course, that's small scale, but what it does is exactly what you said. It creates a sense of anticipation. It creates a sense of scarcity. And if you're investing in that jacket 3 months out, then you're really learning to love that jacket before it's even in your closet. And then you get it as something really special. And I'm really excited about brands, smaller brands, startups who are thinking very differently about the model of buying and behavior change, particularly for young people, to think differently about what clothes and fashion mean. That's where I think the really exciting energy is at the moment.
I always ask my students to calculate their annual budget for clothes. It takes a long time because actually they don't know how much they spend, so they spend a long time to have their annual budget. And then I ask, what is the value of this budget and all the garments you have next year? And then in 10 years. And this is about value. Because if you actually have a very small budget, but with things you really love, in 10 years, it still has some value. But if you just pay for fast fashion for the whole year, in 10 years, it's worth nothing. In 1 year, it's worth nothing. And so I try to show them this is only a brain exercise. Because if you change the mentality, the way you're actually going to see the value of a product, then they can invest in garments. They can invest in a vintage Courrèges dress. I don't know. It's my dream. Yeah, it's. I think it's a mindset, and it comes from brands, of course, to have these services to repair, to hire, whatever. But it's also about education from a very young age.
Totally agree. And sometimes when we say it is cheap, in the end, it's not at all. Something really cheap can be so costful in terms of energy, in terms of many things, and because it will last 2 or 3 days after washing, that we can't say it's cheap anymore. But it's a question of viewpoints and education, just as you said. My last question is, what do you think of the attempts to provide a legal framework for communication practices? So we think about the European regulations on ecological claims, and also la loi climat et résilience pour les Français, n'est-ce pas? So yeah, what do you think about that? Will it change something?
So maybe I will respond to the 2 questions. The one about consumer. It's funny because we're not very linear. I mean, I wouldn't be excited about wearing the same uniforms all the time. I still want creativity. I still want my clothes to be expressive, and I want them to be something that is part of myself, or part of a statement that I believe. So, but at the same time, I think we need to be more conscious about the fact that we need to embrace sobriety. But sobriety or resilience shouldn't be something that get me depressed. So I need to be excited about it. And I don't think that we have found the right way about inspiring consumer and inspiring brands to take this challenge not as a constraint, but as a creativity challenge to shape new dreams, new business models, new way of consumptions. Regarding the clothes, not everything has got the same rules. I mean, your underwears, I don't want to recycle them, or I don't want to lend them. I want to own them. So I think that each clothes and the way you use them might have another history in how we can shape how they can be more sustainable in the futures. Regulations, we need it. But at the same time, regulation, it's coming. It's a massive regulation that is coming. I don't know if everyone is aware of that, but in Europe, green claims is not a small thing. It's a big change that will request all the communication manager to be trained so that they make sure that they understand how sustainability and green allegations can be given. CSRD, I don't know, do you know the acronym? Well, CSRD is the obligations to report on social governance and environmental aspects, and it's a massive revolution. I think not everyone understands what is going to happen, because not only you have to calculate all these things, but you have to report on it, and they will be comparable. And for the first time, you will not be making claims on, I'm going to improve by 10% by 2030. You're going to objectify your impacts, both financially and environmentally, and you're going to publish it in absolute values and not in progression schemes. So that means when you will have published that, all the NGOs that are not willing to be nice with you, they're going to look at that and they're going to compare what you pretend and what is really the state of your business. And if you're not getting ready for that, you have a big risk of backlash, because it's going to be feasible to look the way you evolve, and to look at anything that you've been saying at a macro level and compare it. So I'm not sure that it's going to be implemented exactly as is planned now, because what we're seeing is because there is so much economical tensions, there is a bit of time given to everyone to adjust, but it's important, and it will drive sustainability at the core of the company, and no longer as a nice things to communicate. So that's the good thing about it. And one thing as well that is coming that we haven't talked about, it's PEF, the product environmental footprint, and the obligation to have an eco score on the clothes that you're going to propose. And there are a lot of things about these EBCDF notes, because we still don't know exactly where we're going to land and how it's going to be adopted by the consumer. But I would say that we need regulations, but we need positive regulations that can be implemented in a way where it's drive progress toward changing the things and not paralyzing everyone and making everyone bankrupt. So that's the things that need to be mitigated in regards of regulation.
Yes, anyone else on this question? No.
I think the point on paralysis is really important. I mean, we do need change happens. Excuse me. Change happens through regulation, and it is quite naive to assume that the market will correct itself without some push from regulation. So we need it. Consumers need it. There's a lot of just nonsense and greenwashing out there. It feels, you evidently are very well versed in this, it feels to me like it's going to be a huge correction, a massive burden for companies, and maybe it will be an overcorrection, and maybe that's needed, but I'm seeing companies just paralyzed because there's so much stuff, they don't know what they're doing. I think it'll be interesting to see how it pans out, but it's definitely needed. I just think, yeah, to your point, how far can we push and how quickly before companies just can't deliver and become paralyzed?
Because I think one thing that's happened is that so many players have come into wanting to be the solution provider. So how do you, all of a sudden you're a fashion brand and you have to talk about your material sourcing and your materials and your supply chain and the social and the environmental and the product and on and on and on. And then all of a sudden you also have about 40 different companies that say, well, we can measure it for you perfectly, and all the different databases. So I think one of the things that will be exciting are things like product environmental footprint. Will we get it right the first time? Probably not exactly. I think that would be hard. As we've mentioned, perfection is not always right, but I think having these dialogues between civil society, between brands, between consumers, where we can say this is a cultural industry that is creating products that has big impact, and now we've been on a journey since that has come to light and been really quite clear. And these are all the things that are happening. It's an exciting correction time, but it does definitely need, I think the legal framework is exciting as long as it doesn't debilitate the possibility for companies to exist, which mean pay employees and be, part of the economy.
And maybe one thing that is interesting, I don't know if anyone knows the SBTI.
Yep.
So it's the trajectory that has been designed to aim for net zero 2030 or 2050, and that stand for scientific-based targets. And I was discussing with the head of the SBTI, and she was telling me, so far there is nothing scientific, because what we have to keep in mind is that sustainability is building as walking, and the way we measure impact so far, as we don't practice everywhere life cycle analysis, but we make assumption on database that are not always very perfect, is only starting to be a bit more less than let's assume. Or so we need to be as well nice toward each other and not so much into bashing each other, because the journey is about progress, and it's not about name and shame, but it's making sure that everyone move across this fashion that can stand for compatibility within social justice and social environmental justice.
Thank you. Yes, Alexia? No.
When I smile, you always think.
Question from the audience.
Yes, it's time for the questions. We have a bit time because the next round table will be at 3:15. But maybe now we're starting to be tired, right? It's a very wide topic. Yes, sir. Can we have a micro, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Bart. I'm founder of TextTracer, one of the 40 companies that you mentioned just now, Lauren, trying to help companies give insight to the supply chains. And I think we all agree that supply chains are highly underestimated. They're very, very complex. So I'm also hoping that the PEF is gonna work out, and it will not happen this year. But there's a lot of work to do. Looking at the main question, how to communicate about its social and environmental impact, we didn't mention the digital product passports at all today. Maybe a question for Lauren, given your background at the SAC as well.
Yeah.
What is your view on that?
Thank you for your question, sir.
When you say product passport and SAC, I very quickly see my one colleague who is leading that work stream emblazoned right before my mind, because it wasn't so easy. And what I mean by that is, so the SAC, as I mentioned, it originally started with Walmart and Patagonia in order to come together because Walmart wanted to learn from Patagonia how to be better. And over this then became a realization we needed from the point of the soil, so from scope 4, from our sourcing all the way through to end of life, we needed to come up with a standardized language of measurement practices and reporting, which is known as the Higg Index, which is what we're referring to. And as part of the SAC's mandate, beyond just the measurement for brands, retailers, manufacturers, is to be a multi-stakeholder initiative and to also move forward on very important issues such as how does the fashion industry communicate around things like a product environmental or a product passport. And I mean, down to the nitty-gritty of what colors do you use, to what materials on there, what size are the different fonts. It wasn't my particular work stream, but being able to convene over 300 individual experts who have opinions and a lot to gain or lose in being or not being part of the conversation. I don't think that was so easy. My main role was in building the coalition members. I was very outwardly focused, whereas other team members worked with the members on that. But I think I haven't checked in for maybe a year and a half on where the product passport's gotten, so I will pass the baton to Celine, but I will definitely say it was not easy work from where I saw it last.
So on the digital passport, I'm getting really excited about it. Why? Because it's unable to give, it can enable brands to have a mean to pass on the informations, and I think it's very important for different reasons, because if you've got this digital means to communicate as well with your clients, it's enabled to provide reparation services. So it can drive new business models. It can take the informations about the supply chain that you want to communicate in a way that is interesting to the consumer. It can give advice on how you can maintain and entertain your clothes. It can help you to know how you trash your clothes when they're getting dead. So I think it's a good thing if we've got that, because it will be a mean to an end, because we cannot have etiquette, how do you say that, labels that can have all the information that we need to give now. So it will be a point of entry to give the communications, and it can drive a lot of things interesting as well about memories. We talk about clothes that you buy that have got emotional sustainability on top of technical sustainability, and I think it can help. But at the beginning, it will be painful because it's new tools and the rules are not yet completely fixed. Then we don't know if it's going to be NFT driven and blah, blah, blah. So the journey is going to be long, but at the end of the day, it can be very exciting.
In July, we should have another roundtable about this specific topic with La Chair Bali. La Chair Bali is a conglomerate of different fashion brands and industrial in France working all together on this topic in particular. So maybe we will know more things, but it's very complicated to establish something for everybody and choose the right technology, who will control it. And
I think Fédération de la Mode Circulaire as well is working on that. So we are different coalitions such as Paris Good Fashions, trying to make sure that the framework is going to be friendly.
Yes. I was just saying, as long as we're also using the right tools and technologies for traceability and good communication, and I think we all can remember blockchain kind of just came into fashion a few years ago. It's not something we've been using in our traceability for always. So
that's the very reason why our platform is blockchain powered. So for data verification.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Any other question? Yes, please.
Hi, I want to go back to Celine's point. You put it so eloquently. I think there's a huge amount of tension within the fashion industry. I see a lot of push from product innovation, textile materials to be more sustainable, but at the same time, companies are still trying to grow. So do you think maybe there's room for fashion companies to measure success in a different way outside of growth and continue to pursue this massive amount of product being put out there every year?
My dream is that any company should implement measurement of success at any position within the company with sustainability embedded KPI that are relevant to the role that you've got within the company. But so far, I'm a member as well of Paris Good Fashion. This is still a subject that is really tough to tackle because designer are always judged on the fact either that they're creating a buzz, and sometimes creating a buzz it's not really linked to sustainability, or having a product that sells well. But I'm seeing a lot of work that are done around governance of the company, and especially the company that have adopted B Corp as being a label. They are changing their KPIs and they are shifting a bit away. But as we said, there is so far a relationship that can be inherited from legacy supply chain that are based on volume productions. You get the best price if you buy more. There was a startup in France called Tekin that had invented a very interesting way of producing by design. They went bankrupt, so maybe they were too early in the market. But there is another buzzword that we didn't mention: AI. The implementation of AI could be a good way to be able to produce on demand and to change a relationship within the supply chain where you no longer order big stock to produce big collections that you're not sure that they're going to find the markets. I think that regenerative AI, if implemented well, could be an asset in changing production business models.
The roundtable we had this morning, we had two speakers talking about it and showing example. And one of them, she has created a brand, and she was explaining how she was using AI to anticipate on the ordering in order to limit the waste So yeah, you're right. Certainly, you're right, and it's always a question of time. And
because if we go back to the KPI of a company, so far KPI has still on money. Huh? You don't make any money, you're no longer sustainable. So sustainability has got no meaning if your business model is not sustainable by design. So it's important to find new ways of, because as I said, sustainability has a cost. So not every business model can take it into considerations, but I'm pretty confident that new technology will help and that we can find a way and that more and more funds will invest money to make that happen within the fashion sectors.
Do you want to add something?
No, I agree with what you say, but I really think if you want to be a brand sustainable by heart and also produce, and it means at one stage you need to be maybe hybrid and to have a new business model, a service that will provide something that is not material. And this is actually with my brand. This is what we did. This was actually what was the KPI, the most important KPI. So that the creative part of the brand and the production was really free of KPI, and it was the freedom for us. And there was the studio, and we provided services, sustainability services with the studio. And I think it can be any kind of service. But I don't see any other solution. Yes.
Yeah, it's also about the way the finance is evolving, because I know very a circular fashion brand. She had an investor, but the investor wasn't able to understand that she couldn't have the same business model and growth as you can expect for a classical ready-to-wear brand. So, yeah, just to complete what you said. Yeah.
And upcycling and circularity has a massive cost, because if you upcycle with the workers that are coming from France, even if you work with Entreprises Adaptées, it will be more costly than the rest. So as well, I think at some point we need to change our belief in terms of what should be the right price of a product. Same as food. Currently in France, I don't know if you've seen, agriculture's workers are completely mad on stress, but it's because the business model doesn't enable them to make enough money. So we need maybe to reset prices so that everyone can be happy to do his work in good condition.
Yeah,
thank you.
I just want to say one thing, just since it's so funny. When I was walking over here, I had the exact thought around how do you become sustainable and also still make money with the increased costs? And I was thinking, a brand has to have a non-material element. If I look really into the future, I think you can't just rely on the financial performance from constantly selling, because then you're just constantly selling. And the best way to make money selling is to buy low and sell high, and that will always be a temptation. And that every generation will have the new group of temptation to that. So I think the creative, more sustainable, exciting thing is about value. How do you create more value? And I think the non-material element is a really, really exciting example. And I think I had in mind, in particular, Lululemon. It's become quite in vogue. Maybe some of you have seen regenerative travel or organized travel membership companies where you become a member and you get to go on certain trips. And one additional revenue stream for Lululemon has been experiences. So it's maybe easy to think about Lululemon in this regard, because Lululemon yoga, Lululemon Costa Rica. It's not a hard math, but it's still, in that case, then a really good example, because now they have a Lululemon experience. I'm sure if you Google it, you can figure out which of the very, very cool travel membership clubs that they partnered with. I forget the name, but this is one way, if you're to do it in a way that's right for your brand, again, because not every brand can do a Lululemon yoga trip where it's hosted by, but how can you bring your brand to life in a way that is non-material, that is experiential, that still allows you to have the physical element, and then also in a hopefully non-tacky way, a non-material revenue stream as well.
Do we have one last question? No more question? Okay, maybe you want to say something to conclude?
We supposed that you were doing the wrap-up of the key points that we said.
Well, good. Anyway, you can follow the exchange after. Thank you so much, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you for having us.
So we have another roundtable in a few minutes about the textile industry, which supply chains reorganization and adjustments. See you then.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Merci beaucoup.